get in your soul, not your head. The head's not where good decisions are made. Your soul is where your best decisions are made. And you finally get neutral to where you're willing to do his will. He will give you a peace in your gut that's beyond all understanding, that you know when you know when you know.
Well, welcome, Terry. Micah and I are so glad to have this time with you and to learn from you. I've learned from you over the years and the things we've done together, serving men and women in halftime. Your story, of course, fits perfectly with what Mike and I are doing in the 100X podcast, because the theme is looking for leaders who we have found whose lives are the soil that are producing, that the Lord's using to produce 100X impact in this world and beyond. So every 100X leader's life is unique, and our goal is to share and celebrate your story to not only inspire other great kingdom-oriented leaders like you, but that we can learn from each other. I love the story Jesus told of the 4 different kinds of soil. And he talked about the results or the crop. And I love focusing on results in a certain way. And he was likening our lives to these types of soil. And he said, don't be the soil that's shallow or where the seed gets strangled by the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. Mike and I are drawn to Jesus' explanation when he said the seed sown on good soil represents people who hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop, some 30, 60, some 100-fold. So we want to uncover, as we talk together, Terry, what you have done to hear God's word in your heart and to embrace it even when it's hard and costly, and how you've seen the Lord produce a crop beyond your wildest dreams. So, Micah, first of all, thanks for your friendship and teaming up on this. And would you guide our conversation?
Absolutely. Terry, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. I think it would just be helpful to give everybody a little bit of background on how you grew up and where you grew up, and if any of that ties into your story today.
Well, I grew up about an hour south of Houston here. I'd say that I was the 3rd kid, and in retrospect, my parents kind of ignored me. Though they were good parents, they did the best they knew how. And what caused me to turn out somewhat the way I am is I became a huge people pleaser, both in middle school, high school, and on in life until the Lord kind of took care of that. He eventually caused me to be a recovering people pleaser. So I have to be intentional about it. But that and an overachiever, because I was trying to get my parents' approval. So we grew up in a small town, and I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart.
That's awesome. How long have you guys been married?
54 years and 2 months.
Wow.
55 years and 2 months.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we're old. I'm old as dirt. My mother had to sign my marriage license.
I love that. Well, I'm sure she's trained you well over the last 55 years.
Well,
so.
Yeah, she has.
So where did you go to college, and then what did you do to get your career started?
I went at Lamar University there in Beaumont Regional College, but a good engineering school. So that's where I went, where my friends were going. And then I came out and became an engineer for Monsanto Chemical Company, but I am not detailed, I'm not structured, and I'm more of a people person, and got out of engineering into sales as fast as they'd let me. So I was with them 10 years, and then I went to work for a small oil company, and then I helped a guy start an energy marketing company soon thereafter.
And is that the company you're running today, or is that a different company?
That one we sold to a utility way back, and I started this company in 1989. So and still run it today, and so it's been 34 years. Yeah, so it's been good. It's been a blessing.
I love it. How have you navigated the ups and downs of the energy markets? I'm sure it's a very cyclical business. So how have you navigated those over the years?
I got to give just basically the Lord the credit of being conservative and disciplined and patient and surrendered, really, because we've had many downs in these 35 years, 34 years. And so I would say that as much as anything, and he's changed my heart a lot to not swing for the fence and or hoard my money and not take risk and whatever. So I just basically give him the credit.
It's amazing. What led you to write your book? I know part of your story, but like, can you can you tell a little bit about your story of kind of having a breakdown and kind of what led up to that, and then how that changed you and how you ultimately decided to write Sacred Pace?
When I left Monsanto and then that small oil company, I went to work for this gentleman as became a minority stockholder, eventually a sweat equity, and helped him start this energy marketing company. And in the middle of it, it was my first time to have a chance to make a lot of money. So I gave it my all. My wife watched in awe at how pitiful I was. And I started getting dizzy, and I went to the doctor, and he said it was actually from just stress. And so anyway, one thing led to another. Then my brain started kind of getting fuzzy. And then I got to where I couldn't make decisions because what turned out to be burnout. Then on a Saturday morning, I was at home and my brain just quit thinking. It knew where we were, it knew who I was, knew my family was there, but it would not engage on a thought where to make a decision. And so I assumed I had a nervous breakdown or something. I didn't know. I mean, it just quit. So Doris took me into the bedroom, and eventually I started crying and just got on my knees and say, Lord, take control of my life, because I've clearly ruined it and thought I'd ruined my mind. And I found out later that I was born again that right then. I had thought I was a Christian because I was a deacon getting ready to be an elder, and within a week. So people at the church and I thought I was a Christian, but I found out really later. My analogy is I had the faith of a 6-year-old with Santa Claus. I mean, I really believed, but I kind of had it role reversed of telling him what he needed to do for me. So out of that, then I did a bunch of therapy, and that's when I figured out why I was a people pleaser, why I was an overachiever, and then trying to break through that and change. Then I went back to just as a deal junkie and wanted to start Texon, but I was convinced I didn't want to do it the way I had done it. I'd been a bad husband, a bad father, absentee on both of them, just not honoring to really any of them in time or attention. I was always preoccupied with a deal. And so he convicted me to start Texon at 40 hours a week and no metric goals, and to trust him that he could make it happen. So in that process, he started teaching me, I didn't know it, of how to surrender to finally get his answer. So I took that concept throughout 30 years, I guess, 20 something years at Texon, of trying to, what I call, get neutral, and eventually wrote a book on it and published about 4 years ago called Sacred Pace, of just the gift of surrender, the gift of getting neutral to get to where you really want his will more than your own. So I've actually tried to take all my major life decisions and all my major business decisions and surrender to him to get a sense of what he thinks is best. He knows best. He sees the future, and he loves me and everybody around me way more than I do. So you kind of go, I think I ought to try to tap into that. And so I've been blessed to do that more times than not. I for sure don't walk a perfect score on that.
Terry, we'll dive deeper into that in just a minute. But before we dive into the Sacred Pace and how we can apply it in our own lives, as I've heard your story and that darkest time where your wife Doris and your sister, were kind of picking you up and off the floor and helping you kind of get back. Were you afraid that they would lose respect for you? And how did they reacted, and how has that shaped your relationship with Doris since then?
I don't know that I knew to focus on their respect for me or love for me. I was so afraid I would never get my brain back. And that clearly what I felt was my most prized possession. But since I put way too much focus on making money. Oh goodness, Lord. I mean, there's been so many things to help us grow in our marriage. And obviously the therapy was huge. Me becoming a spiritual leader, I can't underscore that. And Lord, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But then along the way, I mean, it's my spiritual mentor says he thinks possibly the second question God may ask us when we go to heaven after the salvation question is, how did you treat your closest neighbor? And would she say she's second only to God in my life? And my best friend and I talk about that often, and we yet to believe his wife or my wife would say they're second to only God in our life. And the blessing of that journey is if you get to where your wife can say that, or husband for that matter, you've died a many a deaths. You have died a many, you have surrendered to the Lord 100 times or 1,000 times, because marriage is designed for you to become whole and for your spouse to become whole. So it's not designed for just joy and fun. He designed it very strategically to get you whole. And you know that well, Lloyd.
Yeah. So when you get one level lower, Terry, I remember doing you guys and Linda and I and some other buddies did a couple days together, really focusing on our marriages. And I remember watching you and Doris just navigate through the next layers of learning. And how are you training your heart to, back away from being, a strong CEO with all the answers and all the confidence, and be a learner alongside of her?
Well, Lord says we're to be the spiritual leader, but I have a strong feeling, and my wife totally agrees, that we are still yet to agree on all major decisions. I am not to be autocratic. That is not loving her. That is not honoring her. So while being a spiritual leader has changed our family, it still hadn't changed how we approach a decision. I just don't think I'm supposed to edict unless I'm completely called to something. And that doesn't happen that often, but when it does, what I tell people, when you have conviction about something, the other people lay down and accept. It's amazing. So if and when I seldom, but occasionally have conviction, then she's at peace with that. But it has to be complete from the soul, from the Lord, none of this head stuff.
One other question before Micah picks up with your story. I remember one night you and I had an event for your friends at your country club, maybe 15 or 20 of your colleagues from Houston that would be open to exploring what God had for their second half. And so we did a little conversation together around that. And then you dropped me off at the hotel afterwards. And I love cars. And so we pulled up under the portico, and you had this really great sound to your Porsche. And I opened the door to get out, and you turned the car off. And I was a little disappointed because I was enjoying the rumble of the sound. But then you said, "Hey, Lloyd, one more thing before you go." And, we've got a few years between you and me. And so when you say something, I listen carefully. And so I stopped, and obviously I still remember it today. You said to me, "Hey, the people you and I serve, remember, they know a lot about Jesus, but they've never truly been overwhelmed by Jesus. And that makes all the difference. So tell Mike and I about that. What does that really mean? And how do we move in that direction?
Well, I was talking just yesterday, or maybe the day before yesterday, with a friend of mine, a ministry friend of mine that's got really bad cancer and probably going to pass away pretty soon. And we were talking that once you actually feel in your heart and your soul the love of Christ as a person, you become more loving and more lovable, and it's completely transforming. And he totally agreed, and we both said the key is, how do you get somebody not necessarily to understand that, who doesn't want to love, how do they actually figure out how to let Jesus to be overwhelmed by their love? And the only thing I've got a little anecdotal this and that, but the only really probably good answer is Psalm 37:4, delight in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. So obviously, if you want to feel his love and be overwhelmed by his love, I think that would be delighting in the Lord. I think he would like that. And then if you just pray that you want to be overwhelmed by his love, it appears to eventually happen. It appears to eventually happen. I told one Young Life guy years ago, he said his marriage wasn't going well. And I said, well, have you ever felt God's love? You've ever felt it in your heart? And he said, well, I sure know it and see a lot of examples, but no. I said, well, you get to where you are overwhelmed by his love and it'll change your marriage. And about 9 months later, he told me, hey, by the way, my marriage has changed. And he said, I said, why is that? He said, because I now have felt God's love, Jesus' love, who's a person. Well, a lady that's a spiritual director who works for me in my foundation said a fourth of her clients, strong Christian clients that come to see her, are trying to have a relationship with a concept of God rather than a person, Jesus. And she said, that, he said, that's my number one thing to help them understand that we got to get it to be personal and relational.
Yeah, well, Terry, how have you done that in your own life? Like, what have you practically done? I mean, spend time in the Word, prayer. Like, in your own life, how have you developed and gotten to know God's love for you?
Well, I was just blessed many, many years ago. He just completely overwhelmed me. I don't even remember praying about it, but he completely overwhelmed me with his love, Jesus' love. And I just cried like a baby. And then he actually let me feel my brother's love and my sister's love and my parents' love, which I don't think to a large degree I'd ever really allowed that in. And so now I try to go away a couple of times a year for a weekend. And I try to sit still and try to imagine actually sitting with Jesus and try to let him overwhelm me again. I think I'm never completely full of his love due to my own, dysfunction and sin. So just trying to do that when I go away is I'm really blessed to try to do that.
I love that. One question I was thinking about is, I know we have a lot of listeners who probably have, gotten caught up in their work and probably a similar place where you were 35 years ago. And, what advice would you have for them, people who feel just so caught up in success and business and, might have, burned some bridges in their marriage or with their children? Like, what advice would you have for them?
Well, besides Jesus, and which is an obvious answer, I one of the huge blessings is I've learned and accepted in my heart and soul the gift of pain, that it's a tool from the Lord to cause us to become more whole, and not to dodge it when it comes. I don't welcome it because on the front end or in the middle of it, but it's clearly a huge gift from the Lord. It's a huge tool of him to where we don't seem to ever want to change unless we've had something pretty significant negatively happen in our life. And so don't dodge it. Don't try to drink through it or whatever. Try to see what he's trying to teach you and give you as a huge blessing. So it's not easy to get in your soul that surrendering is unbelievable gift from the Lord, to have joy in life, true joy. So just start with accepting pain as a gift and try to plow through it and look at it and see what it is he wants you to change.
And Terry, you have kept your role in business as a platform to make the impact you feel called to make in the world. Talk about how you balance and integrate your life of running a business that, give folks a sense of the size of your business, the kind of reach that you have in people's lives, and then what you're really doing that's you see God producing hundredfold.
Ironically, with no metric goals, we became the largest private company in Houston in revenue, not in worth, but at $6 billion back in 2010. Then we sold two of their largest divisions, went down to about $500 million or 300 million or so, and then we're back up to around 3 billion now. 100 and something employees, as I say, we move a lot of juice around in the energy business, is what I say. But with the boundary of 40 hours and God calling me more and more to ministry, I now probably spend 15 to 20 hours in Texon and the rest in ministry. And my spiritual mentor has said, I said, what should I be doing for them and my employees? And he said, Terry, they're God's. You're to continue to love them and serve him and serve them and make love your first priority as a follower of Christ. Their role is for wherever God takes them. So we've been blessed to win some awards of being the best leadership here in Houston, and that's with me, 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. So that ministry is ongoing of just being. And but where he's called me is more in discipleship and soul care. I've got a lot of initiatives going on with many ministries around that. We've had some culture changes by some of the smaller ministries, trying to have some culture changes in some bigger ministries. I also mentor a lot of business and ministry leaders, too many actually. I hadn't quite figured that out. So I guess surrender and passion. My family office president, when first week she was here, she said, I figured out the first week, this 7 years ago, that your passion's way more in ministry than business. So I was able to break through the burnout and the consequences of burnout and the pain of burnout. I was able to break that chain of the compulsiveness of making money and becoming just a blessing of making money.
I love that. So, Terry, can you lead into, obviously in your book, you talk about kind of the 4 steps. Can you talk through each one of those and kind of how you arrived at each of them?
Let me first say it was easier to put them in steps in a book than to acknowledge it. There's really more homogeneous than probably anything. And so the first step that we have in the book is how to consult your friend Jesus. He's actually become a friend of mine. He says he wants to be a friend of mine, and I've accepted him at face value, and it's been a huge blessing. So in that, really, that means pray for your issue, whether it's whether to go to college of a kid in high school, which was walking through that with my grandson, or about a job or quitting your job or a business transaction, which was more my case. And so you keep praying, you don't quit praying. And then the second step was to gather the facts like we would in any due diligence in business, and you gather the facts. And I do pro-con list. I what I found out was often I think my opinion is a fact. So you start getting objective when you're really trying to do the Lord's will. You start getting objective through prayer and truly trying to see his will. So he starts revealing to you that a lot of times your opinions aren't facts. He also starts revealing to me that I'm not objective about my answers and my decisions. It's more of what I want. Say I want to add a board member to the company, and one person says, oh man, he's high profile, man, you want him. Another person says, so I elevate that weight, and the other person said he's very dishonest, Terry. Oh, I'm going, you just, in my mind I go, well, you just had one bad experience in that. I hadn't heard that from anybody else. So the point is, through prayer you start getting objective. You have to. You cannot trust yourself. You cannot trust yourself. We're pitiful. So the third step is watching for circumstances, which is prayer, and seeing what gives anything weight. Obviously, we have tons of circumstances, but to see where the Lord gives you weight in a situation. I mean, you're praying for this, and again, He's going to honor you. And the last step, the reason I was called to write the book, and the reason the book is done so well and resonates with so many, particularly Christian business entrepreneurs, is what I call getting neutral. When you finally get in your soul, not your head. The head's not where good decisions are made. Your soul is where your best decisions are made. And you finally get neutral to where you're willing to do His will. He will give you a peace in your gut that's beyond all understanding, that you know when you know when you know. But if you don't get it from head to gut to heart, if you don't surrender enough, He will not reveal it. If you still keep wanting kind of your way and to get out of that. I mean, I had a guy call me the other day saying, Terry, I got to get to this neutral place. He said, my head's driving me crazy with fear. I said, no, that's right. And then he said, my gut says go with it. I said, well, you've already got neutral. You just now need to believe it. I started to put a fifth step in the book is when you get neutral, jump off the cliff, because it's very, very seldom is it something you want, because He wants you to get more whole. He loves you too much to just let you say, oh yeah, just do the vanilla thing again. That's why it takes all this time to get neutral and to die to self. And by the way, Jesus, got neutral 2 or 3 times, 3, depending on how you want, in the Bible, saying to the Lord, I don't want to go and on the cross for humankind for all their sins. But if that's what you want, I'll do it. So He was always in His soul, and ready to do God's will. But me takes weeks or month or more to get to finally want His way. And I'm telling you, one person asked me, well, have you ever been disappointed? I said, never in His decision, always in mind that I never finished getting neutral.
Can you give an example of something you've done in your business where you really kind of wrestled through this and a decision that you made because of it?
Sure. I was selling a business back in 2010, and their biggest customer, the one with the longest term contract, said they did not want me to sell the business to their largest competitor that would then become their largest service provider. And my investment bankers said, Terry, that's just what they prefer. Don't do that. My executive team, my board, kind of all are saying, but I'd got convicted from the Lord that I was supposed to honor them. And the CEO is a big public company. CEO and the chairman said, if you take out that key customer, we're probably going to walk away. And I said, well, I don't know what to say. I got convicted. I'm supposed to do this. And so they eventually bought it, and we got to keep the one customer and still have them today, 12, 13 years later, and still have 11 more years with them. with that one customer. So that was a huge one, and a lot of fallout around that, but we were blessed. We were blessed in that decision.
Can you give some perspective on sometimes like how long you've wrestled with these decisions? Because I know the instinct of I'm an entrepreneur as well. And it's like, man, you got to make fast decisions. You got a lot on your plate. Like, so how long have you wrestled with some of these decisions?
Well, I was going to sell our crude oil division to a company, and I was probably 9 months into negotiating and realized I forgot to get neutral. 9 blooming months it drug out, and I'd forgot to even get neutral. And so then I got neutral and went, oh no, I'm not supposed to sell. And then I said, now I got an integrity thing. I said, now how am I going to, I mean, not that I mean, it's still all verbal, but I said, now what am I going to do? And so I said, he countered and on price. And I said, well, here's the deal. I said, if you don't end up agreeing to the price that I'd said, just 9-10 months later, I'm absolutely not selling to you. And if you agree to the price, I'm not sure I'm going to sell to you. So I was kind of going on record. Actually, I was pretty sure, but I was kind of saying, well, that's kind of weird to say. Anyway, and he did not accept my price. And I went, hallelujah, hallelujah. But unfortunately, it's the bigger the decision or the weightier of it, the longer it takes me. I mean, it's because of my sin and my desires. Jesus immediately said, I don't do this, but I'll do it. I say that in my head, but it doesn't, I've said in my head for decades, I want to lose weight, and I gain about 1 pound a year. So, I mean, so it's all about what it takes to surrender. And if I get to where I haven't got an answer yet, then I have to make an answer. I sit as quiet as I can, as long as I can, to just see if I can get any piece from interior of what to do and just go with that. I really feel even non-Christians, if they can go with their gut, it's amazingly accurate without all the death to self. It's amazingly accurate of how it knows best.
Thank you for listening to the 100X podcast. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast service. We would greatly appreciate it if you could rate the show and leave us a review. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor Investments, whose mission is to build America's most generous real estate company. To learn more, please visit anchorinv.com.